The Bank of England announced this week that they're changing the rules around how much money is protected for UK savers. It's being increased from £85,000 per person, where it is now, to £120,000 from the start of December. Now, this is pretty good news, all things considered, but there's also a lot of misunderstanding about what these protections actually mean in practice. So I wanted to actually go through everything for you and explain how this works, as it's one of the most misunderstood things that many people get wrong to this day. Oh, and also I'll show you why this increase isn't really much of a big deal at all, but we'll park that for a second. Okay, so here's the rules at the moment. Basically, in the UK, we have what is called the Financial Services Compensation Scheme. Now, this body works alongside the Bank of England and the Prudential Regulation Authority to make sure that your money is protected when it's held in regulated UK banks and other providers. Now, I'll break that down in a second because that is one massive mess of a word salad. Now, from 2017, the limit was set at £85,000 per person per regulated authorised institution. So in practice, this would mean that if you held £85,000 or less in a bank account somewhere, and then that bank were to fail, you would get 100% of your money returned back to you in just a few days. It's basically there to give you peace of mind and to make sure that we all have trust in the banking system, as if we all start worrying and then all pull our cash out at the same time, we're in big trouble. Now just think back to the crisis of the Northern Rock Bank and those big queues of people pulling their money out back in 2007. Also, there's protections if you hold a joint account with someone else too. So you could hold up to £170,000 worth of cash and have all of that be fully protected in a single bank account. Now, if you had a ton of cash and you were really worried, then you could always use multiple bank accounts and just keep your balance under the £85,000 protection limit at each bank. But obviously, most people don't have anywhere near that. However, just remember that the protections are there per person, per authorised institution. So you do need to make sure that you aren't using the same banks under two different names. For example, HSBC also owns First Direct. So in terms of protections, they count as a single firm. So just make sure if you have a lot of cash and you're in any way worried, use different firms and not the same firm under a different brand. Now, finally, there is a protection for high balances, which might happen in certain circumstances, and these are protected at the moment up to £1 million. Now, this is being increased to £1.4 million in December, and it's for times when you might sell a house, get an inheritance, or some kind of big insurance payout. You get covered by this higher limit for a period of 6 months, so no need to sweat if this ever happens to you. Now, here's where things get interesting, because the examples I've just mentioned are all based in simple bank or savings accounts where you hold cash. It gets a lot more complicated when we start talking about how your investments are protected, like you might have inside an ISA or even a pension. Investments are completely different to cash savings and they get protected in different ways. There's a huge amount of confusion about this, and I still get a lot of questions in my comments all the time about it. Now, in short, most investments are not covered by the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, but there are some exceptions which I'll explain in a second. Also, it's important to mention that these changes starting on the 1st of December to raise the protections to £120,000 are only set to apply to banks, building societies and credit unions. This limit is not going up for cash held in a broker's account on your investing app or platform. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to start panicking or anything else like that, but you should be aware of it and understand that there are other levels of protection and regulation that protect investments. These regulations aren't changing and are staying the same, so there's definitely no need to worry when you think about what might happen in the event of your favourite investing app going bust. Okay, so now that we understand how cash is protected, well, what about our investments? Now, firstly, it's worth saying that the protections are never there to stop you from losing money from a bad investment, nor are they there if you choose a fund which drops 50% in a year and you decide to sell it. No protections are out there to stop you losing money if you choose a bad investment. The value of any investment can go up and down, and that has nothing to do with the regulators. It's just the price that anyone else is willing to pay at any point. Like, for example, if you bought a house and there was a housing market crash, completely separate, nothing to do with the regulators. For example, if you buy a share of Nvidia at $200 and then it drops to $180 next week, that's just the market risk, and if you choose to sell it, that's your choice, but there's no magic money tree there ready to give you back your loss. However, there are some exceptions to this. For example, if you were paying for financial advice from a qualified and regulated professional and they're negligent in any way, you could get your money back here. Maybe they put you in an investment that was way too high risk and something goes wrong. You do have the ability to get compensation here, but generally speaking, investments are not protected by any financial means. Now, this doesn't mean that you're suddenly going to lose all of your money and you need to worry about what's in your ISA or pension. So let me explain what goes on here. If you use an investing app and then buy an investment on it, there are a number of rules which are there to protect you against the risks of that investing app going bust. Now, these rules come from the Financial Conduct Authority, the FCA, and they're in place to make sure that all regulated companies look after your money. For example, the cash inside your investing account or investing app is not allowed to touch the bank account of the investing app's business. Their day-to-day spending is separate from your cash and it must be segregated. Also, when you make an investment, like for example, if you buy a share in a company on that investing platform, that investment is never held by the app themselves directly. It's held by a custodian, which is often a large bank. Now, this is done so that in the event of the investing platform going bust, there's no way for that investment to get mixed up in all of their financials. Your investment and the investing app's cash never get mixed up, and that's all in the rulebook. Let's just run another example to make things even clearer. Let's say that we have £100,000 invested into an ETF investment. This could be a really popular one that might track the S&P 500 or something like that. Just for an example, let's say that it's a Vanguard S&P 500 ETF. Now, if the broker you are using goes bust, you are not going to lose your investment in the Vanguard S&P 500 ETF. This ETF is held outside of the investment broker you're using, and its value is determined by the market at any time. However, what would probably happen is that you'd lose access to your investing app for a while as things got sorted out, or your investment might get moved onto a different platform. But all that really matters is that your investment is not tied to the financial health of the platform itself. Also, it would work in a similar way if instead of the platform going bust, the fund provider goes bust. So in this example, if Vanguard went bust, then that would not mean that you lost all of your money in your investment into their fund. That investment is also segregated and managed by a custodian. Its value is also determined by the market, as ultimately the fund will own shares in a huge range of companies. What would probably happen in this example is that another fund provider would take over the management, so it would get renamed, but you aren't going to suddenly lose everything. Now, all of this is possible without any specific compensation scheme, as this is investing, not cash saving. So when you think about your investments, think about the fact that there are lots of rules and lots of layers, rather than worry about the specific amounts the investments are worth. Lots of people always ask me and say, well, what happens if your investments reach £85,000? Should I now open a new account at a new provider? Ultimately, you don't need to do that when we talk about investments, but you can still have multiple accounts if you also want to avoid any potential risk that a broker could have. For example, if an investing broker did go bust, and that was your only account you were drawing a pension from, them going bust could take a few months to sort out. So maybe it's a good argument to have multiple accounts. Again, it's up to you if you want to do that with your own money, but you don't have to because of any financial limit set by a regulator. Another detail worth highlighting is this one. Some people talk about the fact that ETFs might be based in Ireland or Luxembourg, so this falls outside of any financial services compensation scheme. Well, regardless of this, any investment is not protected from the market, and no compensation is designed to protect against losses caused by the value of the investment going up or down. This is the same whether your fund is based in the UK or based in a place outside of the UK, like Ireland. Other rules like UCITS regulations ensure that money held and managed in a fund is separate from the cash of the fund provider itself. I don't want to get too much into the weeds here on the details, but I did just want to highlight this, as I know some people will bring it up in the comment section. The Financial Services Compensation Scheme is not there to stop you losing money if the stock market goes down. It's really there to make sure that your cash is safe in bank accounts. Other rules and regulations are what help stop losing you money in the event of fraud, or if your investing platform were to go bust itself. Finally, on this point, let me just briefly mention the fact that there are some types of investments that are covered 100% by the Financial Services Compensation Scheme. In fact, these are covered with no limit at all, meaning that you'd get all of the value in case something went wrong. Now, this only applies in a very strict set of circumstances, and those things include annuities that are already in payment, you've got pensions that are structured on insurance contracts, and some older style personal pensions. If you're ever in doubt about protections, then it's best to contact your provider just to make sure that you fully understand the rules. As I always remind people, I'm not a financial advisor, so please make sure you do all of your own research. For example, there's an entirely different organisation out there to protect pensions in defined benefit schemes that are currently being paid out. The Pension Protection Fund is there to cover that and can cover up to 100% of losses with no upper limit, depending on whether you're already drawing a pension or whether you're not quite there yet. As always, keep yourself updated with the rules and ask your provider confirm how they are protected. Now, I said at the start that I don't really think this is a big deal, as basically nothing really is changing other than the amount of protection from £85,000 to £120,000. Between 2017 and now in 2025, the £85,000 limit hasn't been amended at all, so it really has been falling when you consider what inflation has done over that period of time. In fact, if you go to the Bank of England's website and you put in £85,000 in 2017 and ask what it's worth in today's money, you get £114,255. So this increase is really just keeping up with inflation. It's not some kind of extra bonus, and I don't think it should be sold as any kind of extra protection. At least this announcement has got people talking about what is protected when you save or invest your money, and it might help some people better understand how the system works. One thing worth saying here to wrap things up is that we've not seen any major payouts or need for this compensation scheme since the financial crisis hit Northern Rock Bank back in 2007. All of the other times that it's been used have been for much smaller events that don't even make the news. So I can't actually show you the system working. In fact, on the Bank of England's own website, they say this: over 3 financial years, 2021 to 2024, the FSCS declared 11 credit unions and 1 small bank in default. The FSCS paid compensation of about £10 million in relation to deposit claims over those 3 years. So, in other words, we've got you covered, but thankfully, nothing bad has actually happened to need anything major. If anything changes, I'll keep you posted. Let me know if you've got any questions in the comments, and as always, happy investing.